everybody. I am so excited to be here for a second episode of the Parent Teacher Podcast, Conversations on Parenting Adolescents and Teens. I was pleasantly surprised by the number of downloads we had for the first episode last week, and I was thrilled with the feedback I've received. I'd like to give a special shout out to the listeners who come from Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, Canada, and South Africa. I saw your flags pop up on my stats page, and I was really curious about you. Love to have you turning in, and I'm happy to have a vast international audience even now. I'm also happy to let everyone know that this podcast is now available on Apple Podcasts. It is currently being processed and uploaded to Stitcher, Spotify, and Google, and should be available on those platforms shortly as well. Of course, if you can help spread the word, like and share and so on, that would be very helpful at this point. I will probably ask you for ratings eventually, but I thought I should probably get a few episodes out so you actually knew what you were rating. Now, I try to do a few different things here at Parent Teacher Conference. Sometimes I give advice based on what I have seen as a teacher and parent. Other times I try to feature other people who have expertise or unique experience that I think will be helpful. One of the things I also try to do is occasionally feed the souls and hearts of parents. After all, we can't draw water from empty buckets. Parenting is hard enough when we are at our best, but when we are down or discouraged, when we feel like we're running on fumes, it becomes all the more difficult. Today's guest is the first person I thought of when I began to think about trying to help feed the souls and hearts of parents, especially mothers. Although I really believe that anything we talk about today will be useful to fathers, either personally or to file away in case they're in a relationship or partnership with a woman who's helping raise their children. Eliza Thompson has an MSW, that's a master's in social work, from Utah State University. She's a certified social worker and is working as a therapist at a private practice where they specialize in perinatal mental health. Eliza is a self-described self-development junkie. She frequently posts and shares thoughts on her journey and other things she learns on her Instagram account, Eliza in Progress. That's one word, Eliza in Progress. Last year, Eliza had some wonderful insights about motherhood, things that she had learned, sort of letters to a younger self, perhaps. She posted those on Instagram where they got a lot of notice and where they received a lot of positive feedback. I then shared them on my Substack page, and they also got a wonderful response there. Eliza also happens to be my sister. I'm certainly very proud of her, but I've found her to truly have remarkable insight. Her curiosity about the world, her openness to ongoing learning, and her deep and constant analytical skills, as well as her passion for helping people lead happy, meaningful lives, all inform her professional work, but really every facet of her life. Eliza, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Braden. What an intro. Thank you.
So Eliza and I joke, maybe this is, boring for all of you, but just a little inside family baseball here. I am the oldest of six, and Eliza is the youngest of six. We have joked before that our parents really dodged a bullet because we could be twins. Our personalities are similar. We have a lot of traits. I think that would not have been probably a good situation for our parents because both of us have big feelings and had somewhat, tempestuous or stormy childhoods on and off. So mom and dad, if you're listening, just understand how lucky you are that you got a sandwich between some other ones and not right in a row. Is that fair, Eliza?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you for paving the way. And I think I got a 2.0 version of parenting with me, so thank you.
Okay, now it's funny, we laugh about that, but that 2.0 version, but I do think that that's actually a really important thing to consider when you're parenting. And I mean, do you want to unpack that idea, what you meant by parenting 2.0 a little bit? Because I think there's some real important truth in that.
Yeah, I think you learn, right, as you go, and you learn through, like you do with anything, trial and error. And you see the mistakes and you see the cost of those. And And most good parents adjust and start to kind of improve on their parenting. And they were great parents with you, but I know that they did learn and grow from you. So I got the advantage there. But yeah, I think we can apply that to our own parenting, right? Of just seeing it as a progress. And those poor oldest children, they're a little bit the guinea pigs, but they also have advantages that the younger ones don't either. And just seeing it as just learning from our mistakes and repairing what we do wrong. And it's just a journey, right? And we can't be perfect, and that's crazy to expect ourselves to be. So just the best we can do is just improve and learn from our mistakes.
I'm assuming that is partly behind the title of your Instagram account, Eliza in Progress. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, and what what has it meant to you, and what does it become?
That's a great question. I chose that because it was not taken, first of all, on Instagram. So let's just get the practicalities out of the way. But also, no, there really was a reason. It was because it was kind of on this journey of self-discovery. I started it when I believe I started going back to school. And I was just kind of on this whole journey. I'll probably use that word a lot to figure out who I was and improve myself and make progress. And so I just liked that idea of like, I am who I am, but I can be improving, and there's no real destination, right? Like our whole lives, we can be in progress. So that's why I chose it.
I really love that. I've noticed that, and I noticed this first with my students, and then I've started thinking about it in more adult contexts. But every year there's at least one student who does something, makes a mistake, gets in trouble, whatever you want to say. And their response is, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry about that." And you cannot keep getting after someone who just says, "I'm sorry." And now I'm talking about an apology, but I guess when I see a student like that who is open to responding to the situation differently, then suddenly we're not looking so much at discipline. We're looking at learning. We're looking at making progress, owning a mistake, and then moving on. And I'm so amazed at how light and how easy that is compared to the inevitable student who just won't admit that they did anything wrong, and then that just magnifies everything. But I guess I'm thinking in terms of sort of the static versus the open to growth. The person who is determined to say that they're right and show that they're right, and then the person who is open to learning. I think we probably all have both sides of that. I think we probably all have been each of those in different contexts. But I think maybe it is really hard, and I'm not sure, perhaps as we get older it's even harder to continue to be open to progress. Do you have any thoughts, I guess, that have helped you, or that you've seen help clients or whatever? How can we be open to this constant progress as parents, but also as humans?
Yeah. One of the thoughts I had when you were talking about the students you see this in was I thought of myself when I was a kid, and I thought of some of my kids, and I used to be, well, not used to, I am very sensitive, and I got told that a lot by siblings. I don't know if you did, but other siblings would not paint it in the most flattering light. It was very, you're so sensitive. And anyway, and I did not receive criticism or teasing or feedback well at all. And that's a big flaw, and I was always ashamed of that. But now, in kind of learning more about self-development, I have a lot of kind of grace for myself, because now I see that characteristic in my own kids again as well, as a lack of self-compassion, right? It's when people can't own up to their stuff and have a hard time taking criticism or feedback, it usually indicates, not all the time, but usually it indicates that they have a high shame, intolerance, and that they lack some self-compassion. And so the more self-compassion I've had and the more grace I've been able to give myself and kind of realistic goals and things like that, the better able I am to own up to my mistakes and keep kind of striving for that progress without beating myself up.
So
Does that make sense?
it makes total sense. So self-compassion is not a cop-out or a way to preclude the need to grow. It's not a shield from your mistakes. You're saying that self-compassion is actually a critical first step to growth.
Yes, hugely. I always start with my clients there. And it feels counterintuitive and it feels scary. A lot of us would rather beat ourselves up because it feels like we're in control, and it feels like at least we're doing something, at least we're productive. Like, no, we're not meeting our goal, but at least we're, beating ourselves up about it. Like, that feels weirdly productive. But really, there is research by Kristen Neff. She has a whole book and website on it. But the more self-compassion people have, the better able they are to reach their goals, the more accountable they are, and they just have better outcomes in general. So that really is the first step to progressing, is not having this crazy perfectionistic ideal and not beating yourself up, but just having grace and compassion for yourself is huge.
That is really cool. Listeners, I will try to put a link to that website and that book in the show notes. I'm still learning some of this interface stuff, but that's wonderful. Eliza, what does self-compassion mean? I guess, is it looking at what your intent was as well as the impact? Like, what is it and what isn't it? Like, in real terms, how do I learn to do this with myself?
Got it. Yeah, it's not letting yourself off the hook, right? It's not saying, if you yell at your kids, it's not saying, oh shoot, that's fine, no big deal, right? It's saying to yourself, it's treating yourself with kindness, basically, is kind of the most simplistic definition. But kind of the best hack, I guess, is thinking of what you would say to a friend or a loved one, right? Like, I once had a therapist tell me, had me picture my daughter and what I would say to her if she was struggling with postpartum depression, which I was at the time, and what I would tell her. And it was so beautiful and such a different script than I had been telling myself, right? Myself, it was like, what is your problem? Like, you are such a wimp. You are so lazy. You are so broken, blah, blah, blah. I would never in a million years say that to someone I loved, right? I would just have full understanding. I wouldn't let him off the hook, but I would just say, this is hard. This is really hard. And you are trying so hard, and you're doing, the best you can. And I'm with you. I support you. I love you. That's really all it is. It's just showing up for ourselves like we would a loved one. So kind of changing that script and that narrative and just being kind and gentle with ourselves.
So let's talk. This is, I think, a good segue. Tell us about your journey a little bit, Liz, and how you have come to this, and what's been your pathway.
Okay. So I, had only ever wanted to be a mother and a stay-at-home mom. When I think, in junior high, they make you like, what career do you want to do? And it was like, well, I like to dance, so I guess choreographer. I don't know, but I really didn't know what I was doing, and that was just to get the 7th grade guidance counselor off my back. I really just wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I got married young, and then we kind of, blissfully, ignorantly jumped into parenthood pretty early into our marriage, because it sounds great, sounds fun, sounds like just playing house, right? It'll be great. I can quit my job that I don't like. What could go wrong? What could be hard about it, right? I got hit pretty hard immediately. Well, actually during pregnancy, but then especially after I had my oldest, my son, with postpartum depression. And we were in this little basement apartment with wood paneling, with about 2 inches of light. It was just literally dark, a very dark time in my life. And I think from that moment forward, I just kind of developed, I didn't have that self-compassion, and I developed a script about who I was as a mom, and kind of and defined myself by my flaws and by my inadequacies. And so it was rough. I continued to have kids, and but that script began to grow, and I recovered from the depression, but um, I just kind of kept telling myself the same story, that I was broken because I was struggling with motherhood, that something was wrong with me, because all the moms around me seemed to love it and be natural at it, and seemed to know off the top of their heads how many cookies their kids could have. I was always like, why are you looking at me? What are you talking about? I don't know. 3? I don't know. I would just pull out a number. But I just felt so inadequate. It seemed, especially being a stay-at-home mom, seemed to really hit on all my weaknesses. Well, with the model I had seen of motherhood, my own mom and my sister and sister-in-laws were amazing moms and are amazing moms, but I'm very different from them. And so, I just saw their strengths and compared them to my weaknesses, and just really struggled with depression and anxiety off and on. Yeah, till about 6-ish years ago, and I kind of decided to do something different. And if you want to get into that, we can, or if you have more questions, whatever you need.
Well, so let's just pause there. I think there's some
Okay.
interesting and important things to unpack. Um, First of all, I'm so struck by the idea of that you were comparing your weaknesses to what you saw or perceived as other people's strengths, because
Yes.
and it may not have even been accurate because you weren't in their homes, you didn't see what was happening, but yeah, we all do that. But I feel like that's um I'm struck by this because I'm taught now, I've been in schools now for like, I think it's about 37 years. And during that time, I've worked with a lot of parents, most of whom have been mothers. And so I've seen young mothers, old mothers, I've seen, very ardent stay-at-home mothers to high-powered career women, and just kind of everything in between. And I'm not saying, I don't mean to say this about everyone, but I am struck by how even very confident, accomplished women seem to feel that they are lacking as a mother. And it's sad because it's, first of all, it's just doesn't seem true by any metric at all. I mean, they're really amazing people, amazing moms. But it is really, that seems to be a really sad, I don't know, pandemic of motherhood, is
Yeah.
this self-doubt and comparing your weaknesses again to other strengths. So how
It
did
is.
you um I also say, I will say I do see similar things. I mean, you're talking about things that I can actually, as a father though, I resonate with as well. There's times of self-doubt and of and I don't know, I'm kind of I may just be a little weird on that, but I do think that there's a lot of fathers who have similar journeys, but because we generally as men are not prone to talk about things perhaps as much, that I don't know that gets out there. But I guess, to the imperfect parent out there, whatever you are, mother, father, or frankly grandmother or grandfather, teacher, or whomever, um, who to everyone who's out there looking at their weaknesses and comparing them to the perceived virtues of other people, what would you say to that? I mean, I know you can't just fix that in a quick little comment, but talk to those people for a bit.
Yeah. Okay. First, I would say, don't, going back to the self-compassion, she has 3 pillars of it that she talks about. And one of them is to not over-identify with, with anything really, but especially the negative kind of scripts we have. And so I would say that do not over-identify with your weaknesses. Just because you have depression doesn't mean you are a depressed mom, right? You have depression, and it's one thing of many about you. So don't over-identify. Don't make it your whole thing, your whole script, your whole identity. Number two, I would say, is just to kind of have kind of a reality check, right? Do a little CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy of, hey, do I know, like you said, this is all based on perceptions. We're not at home with this so-called perfect mom, right? We don't know. We're not seeing everything. So it's looks can be deceiving, and just kind of go through the logic of that. Like, is this really true that she could be perfect? Like, no, there's no way. No one's perfect. So, and am I comparing my weaknesses to her strengths? Then no, that's not fair. And then also kind of along those lines, I just did a post about this, but this is so common for clients to come in, especially with a postpartum kind of mental illness. They'll say, well, what's my problem? Why are my neighbors and my sisters and my mom, when I remember back, they seem to be fine. What is my deal? And it's just such an unfair comparison, because it's like, well, do they have your genetics? Do they have your background? Do they have your trauma? Do they have your marriage? Do they have your financial situation? Do they have your support system? I mean, I could go on and on. There's about a million factors, right? And we don't ever take that into account. So just, again, kind of challenge yourself to think through that logically. And unless they're an identical twin you didn't know about, it's just not a fair comparison. So don't compare. It doesn't do any good. And then I guess I would just say, lastly, to find, you do have strengths, and find those and develop those, and form kind of your parenting around those. Don't try to be something you're not, and follow some model that you have that isn't working for you. Fit it to what works for you and what you're good at.
No, it occurs to me as you're talking, I hope I can even phrase this. We use terms like mother or father, and I'm wondering if it would be better or more healthy if we could come up with an alternative. I am not a dad. I am Braden, who is parenting, but I'm still Braden, and I will never be
Yes.
whoever, Mike Brady or Ward Cleaver or anyone like that. It just seems to, it just hit me how we use this kind of universalist catch-all language. In other fields, like we have learned that it's important actually to use people first language, right? A person with depression, or a person who has
Yes.
cancer or whatever. And I just, that's never occurred to me. I want to think about that, but I wonder if even that flip of language would help people, perhaps realizing that they're still them. This is just one context of their life, and like any other, they have
Yes.
strengths and weaknesses. You're so good. I just love kind of, I feel like you've read so much, and you're always thinking about things. And I think that those tendencies, you got into self-improvement, I think, is a way to try to help get out of some of the darkness you were in.
Yeah.
And you started reading widely. You've always been really interested in, I don't know, personality theories, or just things that explain the way people are. So how did you go from kind of an interested, well-read amateur to, going and becoming a professional in this field?
Yeah. That was a journey. I had always been interested in that, like you said, but, and very much, even at 18, considered the field of social work and being a therapist, but it terrified me. I did not have confidence in myself or my abilities. I wasn't ambitious, which, I didn't know at the time, but now I look back, that was just purely protective, because I was just scared of taking a chance and risking something and putting myself out there. So I always had wanted to do it. It was kind of this distant dream, but I just didn't believe in myself, and just raised my kids and felt fine about it. until I kind of had this crossroads moment. I had had my fourth, and she was probably one, and we had moved recently, and I was just struggling. I had been doing so well depression wise for a few years, but it was kind of back again and worse than ever. So I was journaling, like I do when I'm really upset, need to process. And so I was journaling something, and for some reason I turned back some pages and was just reading old entries, which is brutal for your self-image. But this this was actually good and productive because that it was brutal, but it really clarified to me. It just was like I could copy and paste this. It was handwritten, but I could copy and paste every entry. Like I could have predicted every entry was, oh, I'm really struggling. Motherhood's so hard. I feel so bad at it. And it just was kind of this moment of like, what are you doing? Like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing but expecting different results. It just was like that. It was like, I have been feeling this way for such a long time. Something needs to change. And so I kind of started looking into things, and again was still terrified, but I decided to just do one. I made a goal to just do one baby step, because it freaked me out to be like, if I started to think about it, it was like, well, I've got to finish my bachelor's and I have to do a master's, and I don't even know if I'll be a good therapist and all of that. But I couldn't get too far ahead, or I would not do anything. So I literally, my first goal was just to call a college and ask about credits, because it had been 15 years, I think, if my credits were still good. But that was just the first step, call an advisor. And I did. And then I got registered, and I just kept doing those baby steps. And here I am. And it took 6 years to do all that. But I'm now graduated and doing what I love. I love it so, so much. And yeah, it's my passion and what I've always wanted to do, but was scared to do it. And I've learned so much. And yeah, I'm so grateful I took that step.
I think too, now I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but based on other conversations with you, I believe you feel that pursuing this path, which is a pretty big part of who you are this is just a big part of your identity, has also made you a better mother. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yes.
Like it
Yep.
wasn't a conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. No, it's made me happier and more fulfilled, and which just has, great effects, right, on who we're around. And no, I don't regret it at all. I think it's been totally worth it, and it has absolutely made me a better person in general and a better mom.
So, I mean, someone out there may be struggling. It's not that you need to take a 6-year um, course of study and go get a new major or certification or job or
Right.
something. But there probably is something out there that would provide more meaning, something that will fill up a hole in your soul, or help
Yeah.
build your identity. And then with that, chances are you'll have a stronger platform personally, and a little more emotional reserves, and then you can be probably a more engaging, attentive parent. That's at least been my own
Yeah.
experience, and watching you, that's certainly what's seen. Well, so Liza, on that note, let's talk about these specific posts. I mean, we all know like motherhood is very difficult. There's cultural pressures. There's like any number of from just, biological complexities. I mean, to postpartum, like to chemicals, just, and again, to social expectations and family dynamics. So, you found some, I don't know, I think it was 5 different things that you had learned, and you shared them. And I might be wrong. I feel like I was remembering it was sort of in the format of, here's what I wish I had known, or here's what I would tell my younger self. I may be wrong about that, but you shared them, and it seemed to really strike a nerve. Like I just remember watching the comments, and people shared them, and it just really struck home. So can you take us through what these kind of 5 critical things that you learned were?
Absolutely. So the first one is pretty much what we've been talking about, and that is that what is good for me is good for my kids. I think we struggle with that as parents. I would say maybe especially as moms, we're kind of handed a narrative that motherhood equals, or being a good mother equals being selfless, right? And I have strong feelings about that word. Like I get that, it can be a worthy thing to not be selfish, but I really don't love selfless because literally without a self, right? That's really problematic to me. Um, and so, yeah, I ascribe to that same narrative. And so I thought, okay, I guess I just have to not be who I am, right, anymore, and just kind of stick to this very, gender role, and just pretty stereotypical idea of what a good mom is. And it didn't fit me at all. And so through this journey of going back to school and just figuring out my strengths and not beating myself up so much for my weaknesses, I just have seen, like we talked about, that what is good for me, what has led to my happiness, what has led to my growth, what has led to my fulfillment, just makes me a better person, which always affects how we parent, right? So that has been huge. And so, that, like you said, that doesn't need to look like going back to school. That can look like taking breaks. That can look like, finding a hobby, asking for more support. But we're not doing anyone any good by being burned out and being hard on ourselves. That's just going to come out in frustration, resentment, and all sorts of other ways that are damaging. And so if we can just work on ourselves and figure out what's good for us, I think people are scared of it too, because they think that means to indulge, into maybe their weaknesses. And I don't mean that. I'm not saying go be selfish and never consider your kids, but use your values and your integrity as the guardrails on that. Don't just indulge every fantasy and weakness, but use your values and figure out what will bring you good in the long term, and that will always positively impact your kids.
I love what you said about, the word selfless. While we do use it in a positive way, I mean, it literally means without a self. And your children, our children, are relying on someone to be there for them. And in order to do that, we have to have a self. They
Yes.
don't need a selfless person. They need a real person. What would, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there a word you prefer that instead of selfless?
Yeah, I've thought about that. I think unselfish is fine. I don't even super love that. I guess I kind of just love the positive version of what I'm going for, which is someone with integrity, right? Someone with values, that's living their values. So I think that's enough. I don't think you need to put yourself on the altar to be a good person. I think integrity, a sense of integrity, is very much using your sense of self to be a good person. So yeah, I don't have, a quick exchange of a word, but I like the concept more of having integrity.
Love that, Liz. So I was going to say, when I was going to do my doctoral work, I worked all day long. I taught school in New York City schools. And then I had a couple hour train and bus ride to get to NYU at the night for the night. It was the education classes were all night classes. And so every day I had to leave the house. I mean, it was really early. I feel like it was usually around 6 or so leaving the house. And, I never would get home before 11. I mean, if I got home by 11, that was really a good night. And it was I mean, what I was doing was difficult because it's working is hard and going to school is hard. But then also just, I was always on a bus and always on a train. And it was really difficult time for me, really kind of a bleak time. Um, I couldn't do much else. Like I just structurally was not able to go do a hobby or things like that. But I found if I could buy or not buy, but I'd go to the library and I'd buy or check out a book. Um, and if I could read the book on the train, or just even for like 10 minutes before bed, there was something really magical about that, and suddenly I didn't feel like I was trapped. I felt like I was me a little more, and even a small dose of that went a really long way. So I really believe in what you're saying there.
Love that. That's a perfect example of how you can just insert your individuality into your very full, busy life. It makes a huge difference.
And when you say integrity, you're using the full meaning. You don't just mean honesty like we sometimes use it. You're
No,
talking about like
right.
when we would say like
And
structurally
integrated.
integrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
Your values and your actions matching and being whole, right? And aligning in a way that makes you integrated. You have integrated both of those, yeah, pieces of you.
So talk about the next things you learned.
So the next one was that my time and energy were finite and had equal value to my husband's. So this is a concept I learned from a book called Fair Play that I love and highly recommend. She talked about this. She introduced this concept that in society we see men's time and energy as finite, and we value it, and we see women's time and energy as infinite, and we don't value it. And so that was just, that concept alone was so mind-blowing and really shifted for me, and in my marriage, how we did things. So I wish I had learned that sooner, because I, looking back, was very protective of his time and energy, which is great if both partners are doing that, right? But we were both looking out for him, and that didn't work great, and it just made me resentful. And you know, the con for him is that we, when moms do this, we rob our husbands or our partner of time spent with their kids, right? Of that investment, of that knowledge. Like a lot of us think that moms just have this intuition and are good at being able to handle a fussy baby and know just what to do. But really, they've shown that that's just pure time. That's just developed by being around the baby more. And so if your husband's around or your partner's around more, they will develop that too. And so I wish I had done that. I wish I had had him wake up in the night with our colicky acid reflux babies. I wish that we had just been more equal that way and had been partners.
Yeah.
I think that would have helped a lot and saved us a lot of resentment and things that we had to undo years later.
Well, in addition, it seems to me you mentioned that, the positive of that is that it does give the husband, the father, more connection with some really
Yes.
special things. But I'm assuming would also increase the level of connection and intimacy in the marriage. Um, just that it'll feel more like a team, and that you're really
Right.
pulling toward the same thing. So that's great.
Yeah. And it together. Yeah.
And I mean, I think with all of these things, although you correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a magic wand. There's no silver bullet. It's all like
Right.
we do this by sitting down and talking, and then probably getting things wrong, and then readjusting and talking again. And that it's just kind of a constant iterative process, that it's not like you're going to fix something with just one conversation or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's true. It's a process, yeah, for sure. And it's still ongoing for me and my husband. And it's a constant kind of evolvement. So yeah, that's true to point that out. Do you want me to go to number 3?
why don't you jump to that?
Okay. So the third one is that I could define motherhood based on my strengths. Again, we've touched on this. But I compared myself to people around me with completely different personalities, and I came out short, right, in the comparison. And I remember, my sister was really, she was a great seamstress and creative, and she would make these darling themed costumes for her kids for Halloween. And so I just thought, okay, I'm a mom, I guess that's what we do. because I admired her. And so I tried, I don't sew at all. So I actually ended up having, well, this was for Christmas pajamas. Another thing I tried, I actually had her sew my kids' pajamas, which was really great of me. Anyway, but it stressed me out. I tried to do it as simple as I could. And it stressed me out and overwhelmed me. And so it was like one year I couldn't, I was sick or something. And so I just delegated it to my husband, and he went and bought, Spider-Man and whatever, but these store-bought costumes. And it was like, oh, can you do that? Weird. Like it had never occurred to me. And so that wasn't my strength, and that's okay. And so just basing, again, motherhood on what you are good at. And obviously you need to push yourself on things you're not good at. But when it comes to Halloween costumes, who cares, right? That's not something I'm going to die on a hill for. So just stop burning yourself out. Stop trying to compare yourself with others, and use what you're naturally good at.
And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on like gender roles and things, because that is so complex. And that's like, I mean, that's not a podcast. That's, that there's a lot there. But one thing I do want to point out, I have noticed is a lot of times I feel like husbands kind of get mocked for doing the easy way, or being like lazy or this or that. But I want to highlight that in this case, his instinct was right.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to mess with this. This is not that important.
Yeah.
So but I do hear this a lot. I hear frequently kind of men will just sort of be a little mocked or belittled. And I hear it in real life and on TV shows and stuff. But I just do think sometimes there is an instinct to pare down what isn't essential. And
Yeah.
and I think that can be a really useful trait for anyone, male or female. But I think there's actually a virtue in being really careful with how you invest your time in. So, okay, so keep going.
Awesome.
So that was
Okay.
parenting based on your strengths, not on
Yes.
what other people's strengths were. Can you give an
Yes.
example of something you did that was a strength? Like, so that was a weakness.
I am good at. Yeah.
Well, I know there's anything,
That's a
but
good question. Yes. No, I know. Yeah, because we're all people with strengths and weaknesses, I have a lot, right? But I had never focused on those. So I was doing those, I just wasn't recognizing, because it was just like that's supernatural to me. So kind of examples of that are, I'm very empathetic and understanding, and I didn't place any value on that. I didn't even see it as a thing. It just was something that came naturally to me. And now it's like I need to give myself credit for that. That's a great skill, right? I'm good at teaching my kids kind of emotional regulation skills, and talking about our feelings and things like that. Yeah, I am good at simplifying, when I don't get in my own way. But for the most part, I am good at just knowing, what I prioritize, and just putting my energy towards that. So those are just some examples of things I had always done. I just hadn't ever given myself credit for.
so as parents, we maybe need to spend a little more time naming what our strengths are, because it may be that
Yeah.
we're doing things that are really good, but we may not even count them as strengths, since it's just what we are and
Yeah.
what we do. I love that.
Yes. So the next one was that regulating my emotions and healing my wounds were more effective than 20 parenting books. That's obviously just kind of, yeah, maybe an exaggeration, but I had read so many parenting books, and I think there's a place for them. I think they can be helpful, especially for, potty training or a specific topic you really want to learn more about. But I think they're helpful if you have enough of a sense of self and enough of kind of discretion, I guess, for you to know, okay, like maybe this author isn't the end all be all, and doesn't, know everything about me and my child, and maybe I'll just apply what I can. I didn't approach it like that. I approached it like, this author is the expert, and I have to do everything they say. And it just made me more confused. It made it way more complicated. and it made me doubt myself. I would, go to kind of go with my instinct, and then I think, oh, okay, let's see, how do I validate but not, how do I praise their effort but not, um, how do I acknowledge who they are and their emotions without making them, dependent on that, whatever. It made it so complicated. And I just have found that, again, kind of similar themes, but when I focus on myself, when I go to therapy, when I learn how to emotionally regulate, when I'm a better version of myself, when I'm happier, when I'm more fulfilled, I am a better parent. And I just like it kind of boils down to that, and it simplifies things. Um, and, because so much of our reactions to our kids, so much of the problems that we have in parenting are really more about us than about our kids, right? It kind of activates something in us. And again, it's just usually about us, not about the kid. So where do you go? You should go to the source. You should figure out yourself first. And again, go to therapy, read books, figure out how to regulate your own emotions and anxiety. And that will have such huge positive impact.
Journaling was a big part of that for you too. So that's a cheap and readily
Yeah.
available thing one
Yeah.
can. Um,
Yes.
I think also I'm really big on like trying to get like, talk to your spouse, your partner, um, talk to your neighbor, talk to like people can sometimes give you really good insight. You can get a lot of
Yeah.
perspective, even if they don't know the whole picture. Um, they can sometimes give you enough to kind of get you started. What are your triggers? What seems to really upset you? So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
okay, so let's kind of so the first one was that remind me the first one. So let's
What
agree.
that what's good. Okay, that what's good for me is good for my kids. The second one was my time and energy were finite and had equal value to my husband's. The third one was that I could define motherhood based on my strengths. The fourth was regulating my emotions and healing my wounds were more effective than parenting books. And the fifth one is kind of similar to some of them, but that I could develop my sense of self and define myself outside of motherhood. I got the message that womanhood equaled motherhood, and I didn't know you could be an individual, right? I just, if you're a woman, you're a mom, and this is our very, kind of prescriptive ideal of what a mom looks like, which I didn't fit. And so again, going to school and figuring out who I was and what I was good at was just so expanding, and made such a difference. And again, back to concepts we've talked about, I wish I had known sooner that I could, that my individuality could define my motherhood. And I had been doing it the reverse, right? I was trying to fit my individuality into motherhood, where I wish I would have defined motherhood based on who I was, because I just would have been so much better off. And I have been so much better off since I have done that.
I just also think it's got to be, I mean, just unquestionably, there's more for the kids. There's more, it's more interesting. It's probably more fun. It's more, they're going to learn more. They're going to develop better. Like I think that's the other thing is I don't see a downside in any of this. There's sort of no one who's hurt. It all
Right.
really works.
Plus, yeah, sorry to cut you off, but it diversifies, I feel like, your identity and your happiness, that is good, because so often I see, even if motherhood has been a great experience for you and you're a natural at it, um, that role shifts and changes quite a bit, right? And I see so many empty nesters who are struggling to know who they are. And so this is kind of protection against that, of like, this just diversifies your options so that you have kind of a broader foundation to lean on when things inevitably go, different than you planned, when a child doesn't turn out how you want or had pictured, right? When your role of motherhood changes and you're not as involved, or for me, like when motherhood isn't fitting, you're not feeling good about it. So it just helps you to figure out, again, mother is a piece of you, and it's a great piece of you, but it's not all of you. And you can, kind of expand your horizons and broaden your idea of yourself. And it just like, and to your point of it just helps everyone. It also helps your kids, because that's a lot of pressure that we put on our kids if they feel like they are responsible for our identity, right? That's really, that's a lot of pressure and not super healthy. And so the more we can kind of show them, hey, like, I'm fine. Like, yeah, obviously you impact me and I impact you, but I don't need you to be a certain way or whatever, because I know who I am, no matter what you do. Was on the path of least resistance in my life. Just kind of had kids because that's what you do. It sounded great. I just was not intentional, and I did not think through things. And so that has been a huge shift, is just really thinking through, and some of them, if you're like me, you don't realize that till you already have the kids, right? And it's like, oh, okay, but it is what it is. What do I do now? But you absolutely can still choose, right? You really do have options. You really could give them up, right? If it came to that, you could leave, you could do a bunch of it. And I know those are super extreme, but you really do have choices. And so really looking at those and saying, well, who do I want to be? Again, using that integrity and those values. What kind of parent do I want to be? How do I want to show up in my life? What am I, what kind of person do I want to be eventually? Like, what am I aiming for? And okay, I'm going to choose this because it will further that, kind of vision I have of myself and what I want with my values. So that is it, just if someone does that, that makes an enormous impact. And because it's just a lot more empowering, right? If you feel like you have a choice, than just feeling like I'm a victim of my circumstance. Sometimes you don't have great choices, right? But you still can choose, and it's a much more empowering kind of agentic, decisive framework than just like, oh, it is what it is. I can't do anything.
I love the word agentic. I've never heard that word, and I really like that word, agentic. I love it.
Yeah.
So anything you want to, you've been so generous with your time. You've got a lot going on. Anything you want to just, any closing thoughts or things to wrap up or tie together, or that you meant to say a minute ago or something like that?
Yeah, I think kind of the theme is, just customizing parenting to who you are, and having self-compassion, making very intentional choices, using your values and integrity as kind of the guardrails and structure. And yeah, I love your point of just finding more joy. And again, I think that comes down to infusing more of yourself into things, and doing things that are good for you. That's kind of all that comes to mind.
Wonderful. Well, Liz, thank you so much. It's been great to talk with you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for spending a little time with us again on the Parent Teacher Conference podcast. Again, Eliza will often share her thoughts on her Instagram account, Eliza in Progress. Again, one word, ELIZA in Progress. And again, thanks for joining us. I would be so grateful if you could help spread the word about the podcast. I'm hoping to be able to post these about once a week. We'll have to see. It's still a little new, so I'm trying to kind of figure out the cadence of all this. But until then, looking forward to talking to you again. But until then, happy parenting, everyone. You have definitely got this.